Today we'll explore how this close-knit, off-grid community has kept their food fresh and full of flavor for generations. Drawing on a heritage that stretches back to ancient preservation practices, the Amish have perfected simple, low-tech methods that maintain taste, texture, and nutritional benefits. Before we learn their specific approaches, we'll highlight why these methods are gaining popularity. They ensure control over ingredients, extend shelf life naturally, and provide a direct connection to the sources of our meals, something increasingly valuable in a world of processed foods and complex supply chains. Number 1. Ancient roots to Amish reality. Ancient communities refined countless preservation strategies, each adapting to local landscapes and seasonal unpredictability. Coastal groups relied on sun-drying fish, while inland populations smoked wild game, discovering that specific methods emerged from necessity rather than luxury. Across early trade routes, travelers carried seeds of knowledge, allowing fermentation and pickling to spread between distant settlements. Grain storage systems evolved as civilizations learned to protect harvests from moisture, pests, and decay by constructing elevated granaries and sealing them with clay. In arid climates, salting techniques helped maintain vital proteins, ensuring that even limited rainfall didn't mean starvation. As these practices migrated over continents, subtle variations arose. Middle Eastern cultures experimented with layering herbs between preserved fruits, enhancing both taste and stability. Northern peoples used subterranean pits to shield root vegetables from frost, while southern agrarian groups found that certain leaves and ashes slowed spoilage. Oral traditions wove these lessons into family routines, making preservation a shared cultural narrative. Instead of written manuals, people learned from elders who guarded these secrets as living archives of trial and adaptation. Over centuries, what began as localized, improvised techniques converged into a valuable collective inheritance. In some regions, fermenting cabbage became more than culinary habit. It symbolized resilience. Elsewhere, drying berries or bottling fruit juices represented both dietary security and subtle flavor preferences. The Amish, inheriting this sweeping legacy, maintain time-tested methods that reflect global human ingenuity. Their reliance on foundational principles, balancing temperature, controlling moisture, respecting natural acidity, links them directly to these ancient lessons, illustrating that practical wisdom, once widely dispersed, can find renewed purpose in stable, community-centered traditions. Number 2. The Amish philosophy of preservation. They monitor subtle shifts in texture, aroma, and color, recognizing that small sensory details guide their every decision. They observe how varying levels of humidity influence the consistency of their preserved foods, noting that drier conditions enhance certain flavors, while slightly moister environments encourage beneficial microorganisms to thrive. They understand that the right acidity results not from guesswork, but from careful measurement, ensuring that each batch meets a standard that has been tested through years of accumulated knowledge. They view cleanliness as non-negotiable, continuously scrubbing, rinsing, and drying all surfaces and tools before and after use. This prevents contamination and promotes a healthy environment where helpful bacteria gain an advantage over undesirable strains. They rely on timing, keeping track of seasonal patterns that influence the quality of their raw materials. They adjust methods in subtle ways, never introducing artificial agents to quicken or prolong preservation. Instead, they trust their time-honored adjustments, aware that freshness and purity rely heavily on the state of their produce at the moment of processing. They prefer containers made from materials that do not impart unwanted flavors, selecting jars that can be reused and remain free from structural weaknesses. They value silence and patience, believing that unnecessary haste or noise distracts from the concentration required. They document results without fanfare, simply noting improvements or slight deviations from expected outcomes. They maintain a balanced approach to temperature, neither overheating nor underheating, confident that correct warmth naturally encourages beneficial biochemical activities. They accept that not every attempt is flawless. Consistent refinement leads to subtle yet meaningful improvements in quality over time. Number 3, essential tools and workplace organization. They place every item where its purpose can be fulfilled without unnecessary movement, considering even small details like the handle angles on ladles so they rest securely without tipping. They choose pots with thicker bases, ensuring uniform heat distribution and stable boiling. They keep funnels of various widths ready, finding that certain spout shapes minimize splashes and drips. They select jar lifters with rubberized grips, preferring those with balanced tension that gently cradle glass without risk of slipping. They line up their tools according to sequence of use, placing rinse jars on one side and sanitized lids on another, ensuring no accidental cross-contamination. They adjust the workspace height so the repeated lifting of heavy pots or filled jars does not strain the back, and they keep towels within arm's length to quickly address spills. They consider the width of countertops, leaving enough room for racks that prevent direct contact between jars and hot metal surfaces. They use well-fitted lids stored upright in a small crate to ensure quick selection, and they keep extra rubber rings sorted by size. They choose spatulas with flexible tips to efficiently remove trapped air, and they maintain a separate container for cooling utensils, ensuring hot tools have a secure resting place away from busy hands. They pay attention to lighting, positioning lamps to eliminate harsh shadows that could hide cracks or defects in glassware. They even factor in airflow, never letting strong drafts cool jars unevenly. They follow a logical left-to-right progression, starting from washing stations, moving through the filling zone, and ending at the cooling area, making the entire workflow intuitive and predictable. Number 4, understanding water bath canning. They test acidity with pH strips, knowing that even slight variations influence processing times. They understand that subtle temperature differences affect how fast air escapes from jars, ensuring that the internal environment reaches a state where spoilage organisms cannot persist. They measure altitude before starting, adjusting boiling times so that high elevations do not compromise the final product's stability. They verify water purity and mineral content, aware that dissolved substances alter boiling points and potentially impact consistency. They pay attention to the ratio of sugar to fruit solids, understanding that balanced sweetness creates the right conditions for preserving color and flavor under heat. They experiment with preheating jars to maintain steady internal temperatures once submerged, minimizing thermal shock that might lead to tiny fractures. They consider whether their chosen produce is slightly underripe, as this can influence firmness after processing. They research which varietals of peaches or berries hold up best, discovering that certain cultivars produce brighter hues and richer fragrances once sealed. They track seasonal changes that affect natural sugar levels, ensuring that uniform sweetness leads to more predictable results. They use timers that can measure seconds precisely, recognizing that a few moments too long in boiling water may dull subtle fruity notes, while cutting time short risks insufficient vacuum formation. They frequently calibrate thermometers, verifying that the water truly maintains the exact boil required. They note how jar headspace correlates to stable vacuum pressure, ensuring that the oxygen removal process occurs efficiently. They refrain from overcrowding their pot, giving each jar enough room for proper heat circulation and uniform processing. Number 5, transformation over time. They observe subtle chemical shifts as sugars gradually fuse with natural acids, resulting in complex layers that never emerge immediately after sealing. They notice textures adjusting as microscopic interactions between pectin molecules and residual enzymes continue long after jars cool. They track how delicate aromatics dormant at first gain prominence weeks later, allowing previously hidden notes of ripe fruit or freshly harvested herbs to surface. They learn that certain spices mellow into softer undertones, harmonizing with brine or syrup, so no single ingredient overpowers another. They pay attention to color evolution, discovering that bright hues may deepen into richer shades, reflecting intricate transformations occurring at a molecular level. They consider the impact of light exposure, storing jars in low-lit spaces to encourage slow maturation, ensuring subtle flavor changes unfold steadily. They study humidity's influence, noting that moisture in the surrounding air can gently shape the evolving taste profile. They measure how different container shapes and volumes influence flavor concentration, realizing that narrower jars may intensify certain tastes more rapidly. They experiment with layering ingredients inside jars, finding that flavors gradually migrate through dense fruit pieces, altering the balance between tartness and sweetness. They document the timeline of flavor peaks, identifying the point at which a jam's berry essence becomes most pronounced, or when a pickle's tangy bite mellows into something more rounded. They follow aroma volatility, determining that some scent compounds intensify after several months while others fade, leaving refined, subtle fragrances. They understand that this patient watchfulness and careful tracking of gradual changes can turn each jar's contents into a culinary tapestry of intricate flavors. Number 6, salt curing meats, a minimalist art. They select cuts with balanced fat content, avoiding overly lean sections that yield less desirable textures. They press coarse, additive-free salt evenly across every surface, ensuring that crystals form a uniform layer without clumping. They monitor ambient conditions so that airflow remains gentle, enabling gradual moisture release rather than abrupt dehydration. They occasionally rotate pieces to guarantee even penetration, observing how salt crystals dissolve into the muscle tissue and create conditions unfriendly to microbial growth. They assess thickness carefully, knowing that a larger cut demands more time for complete salt saturation. They recognize that subtle enzymatic reactions occur as days pass, allowing natural compounds to rearrange and deepen flavor intensity. They maintain moderate temperatures that support stable transformations without encouraging unwanted mold or off notes. They refrain from introducing sugars or spices, focusing purely on salt's natural properties to concentrate flavors. They consider salt grain size, aware that finer crystals draw moisture differently than coarser grains. They watch for color changes, noting that deeper, slightly translucent tones indicate successful curing. They test firmness by gently pressing the surface, feeling the progressive tightening of fibers that signals proper preservation. They rely on simple wooden supports or racks that prevent liquid pooling and allow excess brine to drain gradually. They understand that as salt migrates inward, it creates a balanced distribution that makes the final product shelf-stable. They find that subtle nutty undertones and faint mineral accents emerge over time, reflecting the simple yet sophisticated interplay between meat proteins and pure salt. They appreciate that each batch, though minimalistic in approach, offers remarkably complex eating experiences. Number 7. Fermentation for nutrition and flavor. They adjust salinity levels so that only the most beneficial lactic acid bacteria thrive, helping break down tough plant fibers into more digestible forms. They monitor subtle shifts in aroma, understanding that certain sour notes emerge only when microbial communities reach optimal density. They track the progression of lactic acid accumulation, recognizing that higher concentrations increase vitamin B synthesis and release compounds that enhance mineral absorption. They rely on precise temperature maintenance, often preferring environments between 18 degrees Celsius and 22 degrees Celsius, since these conditions encourage the right balance of bacterial strains without inviting unwanted yeasts. They pay attention to texture changes, noticing that properly fermented vegetables retain a crisp bite due to specific bacteria producing polysaccharides that reinforce cell walls. They appreciate the role of time, allowing complex flavor profiles to unfold over days or weeks as sugars convert steadily into acids. They measure salt granule size, finding that finer crystals dissolve more evenly, resulting in consistent conditions throughout the brine. They consider how different vegetable varieties respond differently to fermentation, with tougher root crops often developing earthier flavors, while delicate leafy greens quickly acquire a bright tang. They examine color variations closely, aware that natural pigments can transform under acidic conditions, yielding vibrant hues that signal successful microbial activity. They sense that gentle stirring can redistribute microorganisms more uniformly, ensuring every particle of produce experiences similar conditions. They keep records of incremental changes, noting that as beneficial bacteria outcompete spoilage organisms, the final product becomes safer, tastier, and richer in beneficial compounds. They recognize that this dynamic interplay of microbes, nutrients, and controlled conditions transforms simple produce into living, healthful creations. Number 8, ideal storage conditions and ongoing care. They maintain steady temperatures by positioning shelves away from exterior walls, ensuring sudden weather changes won't affect the core environment. They choose wooden racks that absorb minor humidity fluctuations and prevent jars from shifting, while avoiding direct contact with cement floors that could create damp conditions. They consider placing containers at eye level so that any subtle changes in color or clarity are immediately noticeable. They sometimes line shelves with cloth to minimize vibrations that might disturb delicate contents, especially those stored in glass vessels. They ensure there's sufficient spacing between jars so air can circulate, reducing the risk of condensation forming on surfaces. They measure humidity with a simple gauge, aiming for balanced moisture that won't corrode metal lids or encourage mold. They check sealing integrity to prevent drips or condensation falling onto their stocks. They might incorporate natural insulation materials like straw or sawdust to help stabilize temperature and humidity around sensitive items. They arrange their preserves by type and date, grouping similar foods together so that if one develops an issue, they can quickly inspect nearby jars for related problems. They take care not to store aromatic items, like strong cheeses or pungent herbs, too close to their sealed produce, knowing that odors can sometimes permeate seals over long periods. They wipe down jars periodically, removing dust or cobwebs that may mask early signs of trouble. They gently tap jar lids with a spoon to ensure they're still firmly sealed, listening for a sharp, ringing sound that indicates proper vacuum retention. They keep thorough records in a simple notebook, noting any subtle changes observed during inspections. They adjust storage practices seasonally, sometimes using additional insulation in winter to prevent extreme cold from stressing the glass. They refrain from stacking jars too high, maintaining stability and preventing accidental tip-overs. They remain alert to any sticky residues near jar rims, a potential indicator that some liquid may have seeped out. They know that attentive care, small environmental adjustments, and systematic monitoring protect their efforts, ensuring that each jar remains as wholesome and vibrant as the day it was sealed. Number 9, relevance for modern homes. They provide a workable alternative for those fatigued by supermarket aisles lined with prepackaged, additive-laden goods. They empower individuals to choose exactly which produce to preserve, buying in bulk when prices dip at farmers' markets or directly from small-scale growers. They help create pantries stocked with real flavors that don't rely on synthetic enhancers. They encourage exploration of local biodiversity. Unique heirloom tomatoes or rare pepper varieties can be locked into jars before their short season ends, ensuring their tastes remain accessible year-round. They offer a buffer against supply chain disruptions, granting households more security and independence when certain staples become scarce or costly. They appeal to those seeking to reduce kitchen waste, since imperfect-looking produce can still transform beautifully when preserved. They align with the zero-waste ethos by encouraging reusable jars, cutting down on single-use packaging and unnecessary transport. They integrate easily with modern kitchen tools, digital thermometers, electric burners, and adjustable racks, without compromising the traditional core principles. They support healthier eating patterns, as preservatives and excessive sugars become optional rather than unavoidable. They also invite experimentation with flavor combinations, allowing home cooks to test how sweetness and acidity develop over months, learning firsthand how time shapes the meal they'll enjoy later. They invite involvement in community workshops or online forums, where learners exchange tips and discover regional variations, forging connections that transcend geographic boundaries. They inspire confidence in navigating seasonal abundance, teaching how to capture peak ripeness instead of settling for off-season mediocrity. They echo a rising demand for transparency. When people see the whole process, trust in their food's purity and quality grows. They prompt individuals to reflect on cultural traditions, sparking renewed interest in culinary heritage that often lay dormant in old recipe books. They remain flexible, scaling down for those in small apartments who can preserve just a few jars at a time, or scaling up for larger families who wish to stock entire cupboards. They encourage thoughtful organization, labeling, and tasting sessions, turning kitchens into personal food libraries. They represent a quiet form of culinary empowerment, allowing ordinary people to claim control over their diets, preserve fleeting flavors, and ensure their plates tell stories rooted in authenticity.